We've all been there. Someone says something offhanded, a comment that lingers, gnaws at you. Or maybe it's an email that felt cold, a glance that seemed dismissive, and suddenly your mind spirals. Why did they say that? What did they mean? Is there something wrong with me? The truth is, most of us are carrying a silent burden, one that weighs us down, erodes our confidence, and steals our peace. We take things personally, we assume intent, attach meaning, and let external voices dictate how we feel about ourselves. But what if I told you there's another way? A way to break free from the cycle of overthinking and self-doubt? The key isn't to control what others do. The key is to reclaim your peace from within. Think about the last time someone's words or actions upset you. Maybe it was a dismissive comment from a colleague, a friend who didn't invite you to an event, or a stranger who cut you off in traffic. In that moment, it felt personal. It felt like a direct attack on you, on your worth, your importance, your value. But let's take a step back. What if their actions had nothing to do with you? See, as human beings, we have a tendency to make everything about ourselves. When someone reacts a certain way, we assume it's because of something we did or something we lack. But the truth is, people's actions are far more about what's happening in their world than about who we are. Think of the last time you were stressed, overwhelmed, or distracted. Maybe you responded to a message with a short reply, not because you were upset with the person, but because your mind was elsewhere. Maybe you skipped a social event, not because you didn't care about your friends, but because you were mentally drained. Maybe you snapped at someone, not because they deserved it, but because you were carrying frustration from an entirely different situation. Now flip that around. If you've done it, why wouldn't others? That coworker who seemed uninterested in your idea, maybe they're worried about something at home. That friend who forgot to text back, maybe they're dealing with personal struggles you know nothing about. That person who made a harsh comment, maybe they've been conditioned by their own insecurities, fears, or past experiences. We are all walking through life with our own invisible battles, and most of the time, the way someone treats you has more to do with what's happening inside them than anything you've done. Imagine someone walking down the street, headphones in, looking straight ahead. They don't make eye contact, don't smile, don't acknowledge you. It would be easy to assume they're cold or unfriendly. But what if, in reality, they just received difficult news? What if they're lost in thought, replaying a painful conversation, questioning their next step in life? Their silence has nothing to do with you. It's a reflection of what's happening in their world. This applies to every interaction in life. A boss who seems impatient might be dealing with pressures you can't see. A partner who appears distant might be wrestling with their own internal struggles. A stranger who lashes out might be carrying years of unresolved pain. Their actions may affect you, but they're rarely about you. Now, this doesn't mean you should tolerate disrespect or mistreatment. It doesn't mean you should excuse harmful behavior, but it does mean that you can choose how you internalize it. You can decide whether to take it personally or to recognize that people act based on their own perceptions, wounds, and realities. When you start to see the world this way, everything changes. You stop personalizing every cold response. You stop assuming that silence equals rejection. You stop tying your self-worth to the moods and reactions of others. Instead, you develop something far more valuable: emotional freedom. Because the moment you realize that people's actions are about them, not you, is the moment you reclaim your peace. The way we experience life isn't determined by what happens to us. It's shaped by the story we tell ourselves about what happens to us. Every moment, every interaction, every challenge we face is filtered through the lens of our own interpretation. And that interpretation can either empower us or imprison us. Think about this. Two people can go through the exact same situation and come out with completely different experiences. One person might see rejection, while the other sees an opportunity to grow. One might feel defeated, while the other feels challenged to rise higher. The difference? It's not the event itself, it's the narrative they've chosen to believe. Imagine you send a text to a friend, and they don't respond. Hours pass, then days. Your mind starts to fill in the blanks. Did I say something wrong? Are they ignoring me? Are they upset with me? The silence becomes a breeding ground for insecurity, and before you know it, you've convinced yourself that you're being rejected. But what if you told a different story? What if, instead of assuming the worst, you considered other possibilities? Maybe they're overwhelmed with work. Maybe they're going through something personal. Maybe they simply forgot and it has nothing to do with me. Suddenly, the situation carries less weight, the anxiety fades, not because the facts have changed, but because you've chosen a healthier way to interpret them. Reframing the narrative is not about ignoring reality. It's about giving yourself the power to decide how you experience reality. Let's take another example. Say your boss gives you critical feedback on a project. Your initial reaction might be, they don't think I'm good enough, I'm not capable. That thought spirals, leading to self-doubt and frustration. But what if you reframed it? My boss sees potential in me and wants me to improve. They're challenging me because they believe I can do better. The same feedback, but an entirely different experience, one that fuels growth instead of insecurity. The way we interpret events shapes our emotions, and our emotions shape our actions. If you believe that someone's short response means they don't like you, you might withdraw, act distant, or become defensive. All based on a story that might not even be true. But if you choose a more constructive interpretation, your response changes. You stay open, engaged, and free from unnecessary stress. Our brains are wired to seek patterns and meaning, but sometimes they default to the most negative explanation. This is a survival mechanism. It's how we've evolved to protect ourselves from threats. But in modern life, this instinct often works against us, making us assume rejection, failure, or judgment when none actually exist. That's why it's crucial to challenge your initial thoughts and ask yourself, is there another way to see this? Think about athletes, entrepreneurs, or anyone who has achieved something great. They don't look at failure as a personal attack. They see it as a lesson, a stepping stone. If they allowed negative narratives to take over, they'd never push forward. The same applies to everyday life. If we take every comment, setback, or challenge and interpret it as a reflection of our worth, we limit ourselves. But when we reframe, we take control. You are the author of your own story, and the way you choose to write it determines the life you live. Real strength isn't found in how others perceive you. It's not in the titles you hold, the praise you receive, or the approval of those around you. True strength, the kind that lasts, the kind that brings real peace, comes from within. It comes from owning your inner world, from taking responsibility for how you think, feel, and react, no matter what happens outside of you. Most of us go through life reacting. Someone criticizes us and we shrink. Someone ignores us and we feel invisible. Someone praises us and we feel worthy. Our emotions rise and fall based on external factors, and before we know it, we've handed over the keys to our happiness to people who were never meant to hold them. But what if you took back those keys? Imagine for a moment that your sense of worth was no longer dependent on how others treated you. Imagine if instead of seeking validation, you already knew your value. Imagine if your peace wasn't something that could be taken away with a single comment or a passing rejection. That's what it means to own your inner world. Owning your inner world means recognizing that your thoughts and emotions are your responsibility. It means understanding that no one else has the power to control how you feel unless you give it to them. It's not about shutting yourself off or becoming indifferent. It's about building a foundation so strong that no external force can shake it. Think about a tree with deep roots. When storms come, the wind may bend its branches, but it does not uproot the tree. That's the kind of strength that comes from within. But most people live like trees with shallow roots, swaying wildly with every gust of external opinion. They feel good when people approve of them and lost when people don't. They rely on circumstances to determine their emotional state, which means they are never truly in control. So how do you deepen your roots? It starts with self-awareness. You have to understand what triggers you, what makes you feel insecure, what causes you to react instead of respond, because if you don't know yourself, you'll always be at the mercy of the world around you. It also requires shifting where you place your sense of worth. Many people tie their self-worth to external achievements, how successful they are, how many people like them, how much they accomplish. But when your worth is external, it's fragile. The moment something goes wrong, your confidence crumbles. Real strength comes from knowing that your worth is internal. It is not dependent on what others think. It is not determined by external validation. It is something you decide. Look at the most grounded, resilient people, the ones who seem unshaken by criticism, who don't let setbacks define them. It's not because they never face challenges. It's because they've mastered the ability to separate their inner world from the chaos of the outer world. They've learned that they are responsible for their peace, their mindset, their emotions. Owning your inner world also means recognizing that you don't have to react to everything. Not every opinion needs a response. Not every criticism needs to be absorbed. Not every rejection is a reflection of your worth. When you truly own your inner world, you develop the ability to pause, to step back, to decide how you want to respond, rather than simply reacting based on emotion. This kind of strength isn't built overnight. It requires practice. It requires rewiring the way you think, challenging the beliefs that have kept you stuck. It requires learning to sit with discomfort, to face your insecurities, to do the inner work that most people avoid. But when you do this work, when you truly own your inner world, you become unshakable. You stop looking to others for permission to feel good enough. You stop allowing circumstances to dictate your emotional state. You step into a level of power and peace that most people spend their entire lives searching for. The way you experience life is determined not by what happens to you, but by how you choose to interpret and respond to it. When you stop taking things personally, reframe the narratives in your mind, and take ownership of your inner world, you reclaim your peace. You no longer give others the power to dictate your emotions, your confidence, or your self-worth. True strength comes from within. When you know who you are, external noise becomes just that, noise.